Pack your things and get out of this house, now. My son's voice was ice cold as he stood at my basement door, his face drained of all color. I had welcomed his mistress into my home with open arms, treated her like the daughter I never had, but what I discovered in those dusty boxes downstairs would shatter our family forever and expose a truth so twisted, even at 70 years old, I couldn't have imagined the depths of human deception. I'm grateful you're here with me today. Please follow my story to the very end and comment which country you're watching from so I can see how far my truth has traveled. What happened in my basement that autumn evening in 2024 will stay with me until my final breath. The September rain hammered against the windows of my two-story craftsman home in Asheville, North Carolina. The kind of relentless downpour that turns the Blue Ridge Mountains into watercolor paintings of gray and green. At 70 years old, I'd lived through enough storms to know they eventually pass. What I didn't know was that the real storm was already inside my house, smiling at me over Sunday dinner, calling me Mama Beatrice with practiced affection. My name is Beatrice Holloway, and I've lived in this house on Magnolia Street for 44 years. My husband Gerald and I bought it in 1980, back when Asheville was still a sleepy mountain town, and you could purchase a 3-bedroom home with a wraparound porch for what people now spend on a car. Gerald passed 11 years ago, pancreatic cancer, quick and merciless, leaving me alone in a house filled with memories and creaking floorboards that sometimes made me feel like he was still walking the halls. Our only child, my son Trevor, had been my anchor after Gerald died. Trevor was 41 now, a successful civil engineer with his own consulting firm, Holloway and Associates downtown near Pack Square. He'd inherited his father's analytical mind and my stubborn streak, a combination that served him well professionally but had complicated his personal life considerably. His marriage to Stephanie had lasted 12 years before imploding spectacularly 2 years ago. She'd been having an affair with their financial advisor, of all people, the man they'd trusted to plan their retirement. The divorce had been brutal. Stephanie's lawyer had fought for everything, and Trevor had emerged from it financially bruised and emotionally devastated. For 18 months after the divorce, I watched my son become a ghost of himself. He'd come to Sunday dinners at my house, a tradition we'd maintained since he was a boy, and sit at the table, pushing food around his plate, barely speaking. The light had gone out of his eyes. My vibrant, ambitious son had been replaced by someone who seemed to be just going through the motions of living. Then, 6 months ago, everything changed. Meeting Cassandra. "Mom, I want you to meet someone special," Trevor had said in late March, standing in my living room doorway with spring rain dripping from his jacket. His voice carried an excitement I hadn't heard in years, and when he stepped aside, I saw why. She was beautiful in that effortless way some women are, the kind that doesn't seem to require effort. Cassandra Reeves was petite, maybe 5'4", with honey blonde hair that fell in natural waves past her shoulders. Her eyes were an unusual shade of amber, almost golden in my lamplight, and they crinkled at the corners when she smiled. She couldn't have been more than 34 or 35, which gave me a moment's pause, but the genuine warmth in her expression pushed my concerns aside. "Mrs. Holloway, Trevor talks about you constantly," she said, stepping forward with an outstretched hand. Her grip was firm, but not aggressive, and she met my eyes directly. "I've been nervous about meeting you. You're clearly very important to him." I liked that she was nervous. It meant she cared what I thought. "Please, call me Beatrice," I said, ushering them inside from the rain. "And anyone who can get Trevor to smile again is welcome in my home. Come in, both of you. I just made coffee." That first evening set the pattern for the months that followed. Cassandra seemed genuinely interested in our family history. She admired the photographs lining my hallway, Gerald in his army uniform from Vietnam, Trevor at various ages from gap-toothed kindergartner to proud college graduate, family vacations to the Outer Banks and the Great Smoky Mountains. "You can see how loved he was," Cassandra said softly, studying a photo of 5-year-old Trevor on Gerald's shoulders at the beach. That's special, Beatrice. Not everyone grows up with that kind of foundation. Did you? I asked gently. A shadow crossed her face. My childhood was complicated. My mother died when I was 12, and my father wasn't equipped to raise a daughter alone. I spent my teenage years bouncing between relatives who saw me as more than an obligation than family. My heart ached for her. I'm sorry, that must have been terribly difficult. It was, she acknowledged, then brightened. But it taught me to value real family when I find it. That's why meeting you means so much to me. Trevor is lucky to have you. Over the following weeks, Cassandra became woven into the fabric of my life. She and Trevor came to Sunday dinners religiously. She'd bring flowers from the farmer's market, sunflowers, which she had learned were my favorite. She'd insist on helping in the kitchen despite my protests, and we'd stand side by side preparing vegetables or washing dishes while Trevor watched football in the living room. This is what I always imagined family could be like. Just easy, comfortable, no drama or tension. I squeezed her shoulder. You're family now, sweetheart. As far as I'm concerned, you're the daughter I never had. Her eyes filled with tears and she hugged me tightly. Thank you, Mama Beatrice. You have no idea what that means to me. Mama Beatrice. She'd started calling me that a month into dating Trevor, and I'd loved it. It felt natural, warm, like we'd known each other for years rather than weeks. But even in those early days, there were moments that didn't quite fit. The small discrepancies. The first oddity I noticed was in late April. We were having dinner. I'd made my famous chicken and dumplings, a recipe passed down from my own grandmother, and I'd asked Cassandra about her work. Trevor mentioned you're a freelance marketing consultant, I said, passing her the bread basket. What kind of clients do you usually work with? Oh, it varies, she said with an airy wave of her hand. Small businesses mostly, helping them establish their online presence, social media strategy, website optimization, that sort of thing. That must keep you busy. Do you work from home or do you have an office? From home, usually. The flexibility is nice. She changed the subject smoothly. Trevor tells me you used to teach elementary school. That must have been so rewarding. I let her steer the conversation away, but the vagueness nagged at me. Most people who are passionate about their work love talking about it. Cassandra seemed more interested in avoiding it. The second incident happened in May. I dropped by Trevor's condo unannounced, something I rarely did, but I'd been at the grocery store nearby and had a pot of soup I'd made for him. I used the key he'd given me and let myself in, calling out as I entered. Trevor, honey, are you home? No answer, but I heard voices from the bedroom. I walked down the hallway and found the door ajar. Inside, Trevor was on his laptop on a video call while Cassandra sat beside him on the bed, scrolling through her phone. The property assessment came back higher than expected. If you're serious about the investment, we should move quickly. I'll need to review the numbers. Send me the full report. I knocked lightly on the doorframe. Sorry to interrupt. I brought soup. Mom! Trevor looked surprised but pleased. Come in. We're just finishing up a call about a potential real estate investment. I waved to whoever was on the screen and backed out, but not before I caught Cassandra's expression. For just a second, her face had shown something sharp and calculating before smoothing back into her usual pleasant smile. The third warning came in late June. I'd been weeding my garden on a Tuesday morning when my phone rang. It was Janet, my neighbor 3 houses down, an elderly woman who'd lived on Magnolia Street even longer than I had. Beatrice, dear, I hope I'm not overstepping, but I saw your son's girlfriend at the coffee shop this morning with another man. They seemed close. I don't want to spread gossip, but I thought you should know. My stomach tightened. Are you sure it was Cassandra? Blonde hair, petite, very pretty,
Yes, I'm certain. They were in the corner booth, and she was showing him something on her phone. He had his hand on her arm. It just seemed intimate. I thanked Janet and hung up, my mind racing. There could be a perfectly innocent explanation. A client meeting, an old friend. I wouldn't jump to conclusions without evidence. That evening, I mentioned it casually to Trevor. Janet thought she saw Cassandra at the coffee shop today with another man. I told her she must have been mistaken. Trevor laughed. Cassandra doesn't even like coffee. She's a tea drinker. Janet probably saw someone who looked like her. I wanted to believe him. I chose to believe him. Because the alternative, that this woman who called me Mama Beatrice and seemed to adore my son was deceiving him, was too painful to consider. The house comments begin. The real alarm bells started ringing in July. Cassandra and I were alone in my kitchen. Trevor had run out to pick up dessert from the bakery, and I was making iced tea for dinner. The summer heat had been oppressive, and even with the AC running, my old house struggled to stay cool. "Beatrice, can I ask you something?" Cassandra said, leaning against my counter. "Of course, sweetheart. Have you ever thought about what you might do with this house? I mean, it's a lot of space for one person, and the upkeep must be exhausting." "Well, I've lived here for 44 years. It's my home. I suppose I'll stay here as long as I'm able." Of course, she said quickly. "I didn't mean to suggest you should leave. It's just that Trevor and I have been talking about our future, and we've been looking at houses in the area. Everything is so expensive now. Do you know what this neighborhood has become? Houses on Magnolia Street are selling for over $800,000. "Are they?" "Oh, yes. Your property alone, with this lot size and the original craftsman details, would probably fetch close to $1 million in the current market. Maybe more to the right buyer. It's amazing what you're sitting on." Something cold settled in my chest. I'm not sitting on anything. I'm living in my home.
Of course, I didn't mean it like that, she laughed, touching my arm. I just meant that if you ever did decide to downsize, maybe to one of those nice senior living communities with less maintenance, you'd have significant equity to work with. And Trevor and I could help with the transition. We'd make sure you were comfortable. Trevor returned with the cake before I could respond, and Cassandra's demeanor shifted instantly back to cheerful and light. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just been evaluated like a piece of real estate rather than a person. The comments continued in subtle ways over the following weeks. "This house has such good bones. Someone could really do something special with it. Have you seen those renovated craftsman homes downtown? They're selling for crazy money." Trevor and I were just saying how perfect this location is. Walking distance to downtown, established neighborhood. Each comment alone was innocuous. Together, they formed a pattern that made my skin crawl. The overheard conversation. The breaking point came in early August. I'd been out running errands on a Wednesday afternoon, my usual routine of the post office, the pharmacy, and the grocery store. I'd forgotten my reading glasses and realized I'd never be able to read the small print on my prescription label, so I drove back home to grab them. Trevor's Tesla was in my driveway, which was odd. He should have been at work. His office didn't close until 6, and it was barely 2 o'clock. I let myself in quietly through the back door that led to my kitchen, not wanting to startle them if they were having an intimate moment. But as I stepped inside, I heard voices from upstairs, from my bedroom. They were in my bedroom. I stood frozen in my kitchen, my heart beginning to pound. Why would they be in my bedroom? At least $950,000, probably more if we list it right, Cassandra was saying, her voice carrying down the stairs. The real estate agent I talked to said craftsman homes in this condition are incredibly sought after. We could have multiple offers within a week. Cassandra, I don't know about this. It's my mother's home. I can't just ask her to sell it. Baby, think practically. She's 70 years old. She doesn't need 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. She's rattling around in here all alone. One fall on these stairs, one medical emergency, and she'll need to move anyway. Why not plan for it now while she's still healthy enough to enjoy the transition?
She loves this house. She and Dad built their whole life here. I know, and that's beautiful. But your dad is gone, Trevor, and your mom is getting older every day. Wouldn't she want to know you and I had the resources to build a real future together? To maybe start a family of our own? There was a pause. I pressed myself against the kitchen wall, barely breathing. We could set her up somewhere really nice, Cassandra continued, her voice softening, becoming more persuasive. One of those lovely retirement communities with activities and healthcare on site. She'd probably make friends, be more social, and we'd have the capital to finally buy our own place, maybe even expand your business. This is about securing our future, honey, all of our futures, including your mom's. I'll think about it, Trevor said finally, but I'm not making any promises. If we do this, it has to be her decision. Of course, I would never suggest otherwise. You know how much I love Mama Beatrice. I just want what's best for everyone. I backed out of my house as quietly as I entered, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip my car keys. I sat in my driveway for 10 minutes, trying to process what I'd heard. Cassandra had been talking to real estate agents about my house, behind my back. She was planning to convince Trevor, to convince me, to sell my home so they could have the money. And Trevor, my sweet, trusting Trevor, was actually considering it. I drove to the park and sat by the lake for 2 hours, watching the ducks and trying to make sense of my emotions. Betrayal, anger, hurt, but also confusion. Was I overreacting? Was Cassandra actually right that I should downsize? Was I being selfish, holding on to a house too big for me when it could help Trevor build his future? No. This was my home, the place where I raised my son, nursed my husband through his final days, celebrated every Christmas and birthday for 40 decades. It wasn't a commodity to be liquidated for someone else's benefit. That evening, when Trevor and Cassandra came for their usual Sunday dinner, it was actually Wednesday, but they had asked to move it, I tried to act normal, but everything felt different now. Every smile from Cassandra felt calculated. Every affectionate Mama Beatrice felt manipulative. "Are you feeling okay?" Trevor asked me halfway through dinner. "You seem quiet." "Just tired, sweetheart. It's been a long day." Cassandra witched across the table and squeezed my hand. "You work too hard, Mama Beatrice. You're always taking care of everyone else. You need to let us take care of you for a change." I looked into her amber eyes and wondered who was really behind them. Who was this woman who had so completely fooled me and my son? After they left that night, I did something I never thought I'd do. I opened my laptop and started investigating Cassandra Reeves. I'm not particularly tech-savvy. Trevor usually helps me when I have computer problems, but I know how to use Google and Facebook and Instagram. I'd looked up people before, found old classmates, researched contractors before hiring them. But when I searched for Cassandra Reeves, I found almost nothing. No Facebook profile, no Instagram account. Her LinkedIn showed only the bare minimum. Self-employed marketing consultant with a profile picture and no other details. The account had been created 6 months ago, right around the time she'd started dating Trevin.
For a marketing consultant, that seemed impossible. Weren't those people supposed to have huge social media presences? Wasn't that literally their job? I tried different variations. Cassandra Ann Reeves, Cassie Reeves, C. Reeves. Different spellings, Cassandra, Cassandre. Nothing matched the woman who'd been sitting at my dinner table. I searched for her business. Reeves Marketing Consulting. Returned no results. No website, no business listings, no reviews. It was like she'd appeared out of thin air 6 months ago. My hands were trembling as I picked up my phone and called my old friend Margaret, who taught with me at Asheville Elementary for 30 years before we both retired. "Margaret, you remember I told you about Trevor's girlfriend? The blonde one? Cassandra?" "Yes." "Can you do me a favor? You're good with computers. Can you see if you can find anything about her online? Any history, any social media, anything?" Margaret was quiet for a moment. "Beatrice, are you sure you want to go down this road? Sometimes looking too hard for problems means you'll find them, even if they're not really there." Please, Margaret, I have a bad feeling. She sighed. Give me until tomorrow, I'll see what I can find. Margaret called me back the next afternoon. Beatrice, I spent 2 hours searching. There's almost nothing on this woman. The only Cassandra Reeves I could find matching the age and description you gave me had a completely different background. She's a dental hygienist in Ohio and has been married for 10 years. Your Cassandra is either incredibly private or what? Or she's using a name that isn't really hers. The room seemed to tilt. Why would she do that? I don't know, but it's not normal for someone to have zero digital footprint in 2024. Everyone exists online in some capacity, even if it's just tagged in other people's photos or mentioned in news articles or listed in old school yearbooks. This woman is a ghost. After hanging up with Margaret, I sat in my living room for a long time, staring at the family photos on my mantel. Trevor as a baby, Trevor on his first day of school, Trevor at his wedding to Stephanie. That wedding had cost us $30,000, money Gerald and I had saved for years to give them a beautiful start. And now he was planning to marry another woman, a woman with no past, no digital presence, and very clear designs on my house. That's when I remembered the boxes. The boxes in the basement. It had been about 3 months ago, in early June. Cassandra had asked if she could store some things in my basement temporarily. I'm between apartments, she'd explained, standing in my kitchen with an apologetic smile. The place I was renting got sold, and my new lease doesn't start for another month. I have a few boxes of personal things, just documents and keepsakes, that I don't want to leave in storage. Would you mind terribly if I kept them here, just for a few weeks? How could I say no? She had been nothing but lovely to me at that point, and storing a few boxes seemed like a small favor. Trevor had helped her bring them down to my basement one Sunday afternoon, maybe 6 or 7 banker's boxes, the kind you use for filing documents. They'd stacked them neatly in the far corner behind some of my own storage boxes full of Christmas decorations and old books. Thanks, Mama Beatrice, Cassandra had said, hugging me. I promise I'll get them out of your way as soon as my new place is ready. But her new place had apparently become ready because I'd heard her and Trevor talking about her moving into his condo a few weeks later. Yet the boxes were still in my basement. I'd forgotten about them, honestly. They were tucked away in a corner I rarely visited, and life had moved on. But now, with everything I'd discovered, the missing online presence, the overheard conversation about selling my house, and the suspicious meetings Janet had witnessed, those boxes suddenly felt significant. What was Cassandra Reeves hiding in my basement? I stood at the top of my basement stairs at 11 o'clock that night, my hand on the light switch, my heart pounding in my chest. Part of me knew that going through someone else's belongings was wrong. It was an invasion of privacy. Trevor would be furious if he found out. But another part of me, the part that raised a child alone after Gerald died, the part that survived teaching third graders for 35 years, the part that had weathered every storm life had thrown at me, that part knew that sometimes you have to trust your instincts. And every instinct I had was screaming that something was very, very wrong. I flipped the light switch and descended into my basement toward whatever truth was waiting in those boxes in the corner. What I would find there would change everything, but I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that the woman my son loved, the woman who called me Mama Beatrice, the woman who wanted me to sell my home and move into a retirement community, that woman had secrets. And in less than 24 hours, those secrets would explode in a way that would tear our family apart and leave my son standing at the same basement door, his face white with horror, telling me to pack my things and leave my own house. But that came later. First, I had to open those boxes and discover who Cassandra Reeves really was.
The basement stairs creaked under my weight as I descended into the cool darkness. I had lived in this house for 44 years, and these stairs had announced my presence for every single one of them. Gerald had always meant to fix that third step from the bottom, the one that groaned like an old door hinge, but somehow it never made it to the top of his to-do list. Now it was just another voice in a house full of memories. The fluorescent light flickered twice before settling into its harsh white glow, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. My basement had always been organized, a habit ingrained from my years as a teacher when I learned that chaos in your environment led to chaos in your mind. Holiday decorations were labeled by season and stacked along the west wall. Gerald's old tools hung on pegboards, each outlined in black marker so you could see at a glance if something was missing. Boxes of Trevor's childhood belongings, report cards, art projects, participation trophies from Little League occupied their own corner, waiting for grandchildren who might never come. And there, in the far corner, behind my Christmas boxes, sat Cassandra's 7 banker's boxes. They looked innocent enough. Standard office boxes, the kind you could buy at any office supply store, with lids that fit snugly over the top. No labels, no markings, just plain brown cardboard that could contain anything from tax documents to old magazines. I pulled my cardigan tighter around my shoulders. The August heat didn't penetrate down here, and the basement maintained a constant coolness that felt refreshing during the day, but eerie at night. The silence was absolute, except for the distant hum of my water heater in the corner. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for the first box. This was wrong. I knew it was wrong. These were someone else's belongings, stored in my home with the expectation of privacy. Trevor would be horrified if he knew what I was doing. He'd always been a rule follower, even as a child. If there was a sign that said, "Do not enter," Trevor would stand at the boundary and never even consider crossing it. But I'd also raised him to trust his instincts, and right now, every instinct I had was screaming that Cassandra Reeves was not who she claimed to be. I lifted the lid off the first box. Papers. Stacks and stacks of papers, organized into manila folders with handwritten labels. I pulled out the first folder, squinting at the writing in the dim light. Hartford CT, March 2019.
Charlotte, NC, March 2022. Victim, George Thompson, 79. Amount stolen, $112,000. Suspect name, Victoria James. The pattern was horrifyingly clear. Different cities, different names, different appearances in the photos. Hair color, style, weight, glasses or no glasses, but always the same type of victim. Elderly, recently widowed or living alone, financially comfortable. And in every case, the suspect had disappeared before trial, fleeing jurisdiction, vanishing like smoke. I opened the second box with hands that had gone numb. This one contained what looked like identity documents, multiple driver's licenses from different states, all with different names but featuring photos of women who could all be the same person, with minor alterations. Social security cards, birth certificates, bank cards, credit cards. Jennifer Walsh, Amy Chen, Melissa Patterson, Sarah Mitchell, Victoria James, Rebecca Morrison, and at the bottom of the stack, most recent of all, Cassandra Reeves. The driver's license was from South Carolina, issued just 8 months ago. The photo was unmistakably the woman who'd been calling me Mama Beatrice, who'd been sitting at my dinner table, who'd been sleeping in my son's bed. The third box contained financial records, bank statements showing large deposits followed by withdrawals, multiple accounts in different names, cashier's checks, money orders, a ledger, handwritten in neat script, tracking what appeared to be stolen funds and how they'd been moved and hidden. The numbers made me dizzy. We weren't talking about thousands of dollars. We were talking about over $1 million, accumulated over 7 years, through a systematic campaign of defrauding elderly people. Box 4 held what appeared to be research files, printed Facebook profiles of potential victims, property records, obituaries of deceased spouses, credit reports, information about net worth, family situations, whether they had children nearby who might interfere. One folder was particularly chilling. It was labeled simply Holloway. Inside were printed pages about Trevor, his LinkedIn profile, articles about his engineering firm, property records for his condo, his divorce decree from Stephanie showing the settlement amounts, bank statements. How had she gotten his bank statements? And then I found papers about me. My property deed showing I owned my house outright, tax assessment records valuing it at $890,000, my meager retirement account statements, my late husband's obituary from 11 years ago, a printed Facebook post from Trevor's page, 2 years old, where he'd written, "Hardest day of my life was saying goodbye to Stephanie, but at least I still have Mom. She's been my rock through everything." Someone had highlighted that last sentence. There were notes in the margins, written in the same neat handwriting as the ledger. Strong mother-son bond. Leverage this. He'll do anything for her approval. House is key. She's emotionally attached, but he's practical. Work the guilt angle. I had to sit down on an old folding chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. This woman, whoever she really was, had researched us like we were targets, because that's exactly what we were. She'd studied my relationship with Trevor, identified the vulnerabilities in our family structure, and crafted an entire persona designed to exploit us. The orphan backstory, the interest in family, the freelance consultant job that explained why she had flexible time and no office, even the name Cassandra Reeves. I pulled out my phone and searched for it. There were dozens of Cassandra Reeves in the United States. It was common enough to seem plausible, but not so common that someone would easily find the real Cassandra Reeves she might have stolen the identity from. The fifth box contained what looked like contingency plans, printed guides on how to establish new identities, information about countries with no extradition treaties, bank account information for offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Panama, burner phones still in their packaging, prepaid credit cards. This woman had done this before, many times, and she had escape routes planned when things went wrong. Box 6 held personal effects that made my skin crawl. Wigs, blonde, brunette, red, black, colored contact lenses, makeup kits, glasses with plain glass lenses just for changing appearance, clothing in different styles. She could transform herself completely in an hour. The seventh and final box was the one that broke my heart. It contained what appeared to be journals, 5 of them, cheap composition notebooks with dates written on the covers. I opened the most recent one, dated January 2024 to present. The entries were chilling in their casual cruelty. January 15th, 2024, Scouting Asheville area. Good demographics, wealthy retirees, strong real estate market. Need to establish presence before selecting a target. February 3rd, met Trevor Holloway at coffee shop on Lexington. Divorced, vulnerable, close to his mother. Mother owns property worth $800K. Perfect setup. Initiated contact. February 10th, first date with Trevor. He's easier than expected. Still raw from divorce, mentioned his mother multiple times. Clear emotional dependency. This is the angle. March 1st, met the mother, Beatrice Holloway, 70, widowed, living alone in valuable property. Sweet woman, trusting. This will be almost too easy. She's lonely and looking for daughter figure. I'll give her exactly what she wants. March 15th, Beatrice invited me to call her Mama Beatrice. Perfect. Trevor is falling hard. moving faster than usual, should be able to close this operation in 6 to 8 months. April 22nd, Trevor mentioned his mother will never sell the house. Too many memories. Need to change this narrative. We'll start planting seeds about her safety, about downsizing being responsible, about our future together needing capital. The guilt approach works best with people like Trevor.
May 30th. Storing my documentation at Beatrice's house. If things go south, easier to claim it was planted/I'm being framed if the boxes are in someone else's possession. Plus, gives me reason to maintain access to property. July 8. Beatrice is more resistant than expected. Trevor mentioned she seemed hurt by my downsizing suggestions. Need to be more subtle. But clock is ticking. Been here almost 6 months. Much longer and pattern becomes risky. August 5th. Trevor is finally coming around on the house idea. Cassandra is getting impatient, but I can feel it shifting. Another month, maybe 2. We'll propose marriage soon. That usually seals emotional commitment and makes them less likely to question inconsistencies. The entries went on and on, documenting her manipulation of my son and me with the detached precision of a scientist recording an experiment. There was no emotion, no guilt, no recognition that we were human beings whose lives she was destroying. We were just marks, targets, resources to be extracted. I set the journal down and looked at the mountain of evidence surrounding me. 7 boxes of proof that the woman my son loved, the woman I'd welcomed into my home and heart, was a career criminal who had defrauded elderly people across the eastern United States for almost a decade. And she'd been planning to do the same thing to us. The house, I realized with sick certainty, was just the beginning. Once Trevor married her, she'd have access to everything. His business accounts, his savings, and with power of attorney documents that she'd surely convince him to sign just in case something happened, she'd eventually have access to my accounts too. She would take everything, destroy our family, and disappear into the wind like she had half a dozen times before. Unless I stopped her. "This woman is a professional," Sarah said finally, photographing the fake IDs with her phone. "And she's been operating for a long time. Some of these cases," she held up the Hartford newspaper clipping, "I recognize this. There were bulletins about Melissa Patterson. Multiple states have warrants out for her." "What do we do?" I asked. "How do I tell Trevor that the woman he wants to marry is a con artist?" Sarah sat down heavily in one of my dining room chairs. "That's the tricky part. If we bring in the police officially right now, there's a good chance she'll flee before we can arrest her. These types of criminals are always watching for signs they've been discovered. But if we wait too long, she might complete whatever scheme she's planning with Trevor." "She wants him to convince me to sell my house," I said quietly. "She's been working on both of us for months, trying to get access to the equity." "That's probably just the first step," Sarah said. "Once she's married to him, she'll have legal access to his assets, and she can work on getting power of attorney over yours. Then she'll drain everything and disappear. We're probably talking about her trying to steal over $1 million total when you combine the house value, Trevor's business assets, and your retirement accounts." The number made me feel sick. So what do we do? Sarah thought for a long moment. "We need to catch her in the act, get her to incriminate herself in a way that we can record. And we need to make sure Trevor sees her true nature clearly, so there's no doubt and she can't manipulate him later. Do you think you could get them both here? Tell them you want to have an important family discussion? About what? Tell them you've been thinking about what Cassandra suggested, about downsizing. Say you want to discuss the house situation seriously. That should bring her running, and it'll give us the opportunity we need." We spent the next 2 hours planning. Sarah made calls to colleagues, verified that multiple police departments across several states had active warrants for the various identities Cassandra had used, and arranged for backup to be nearby but out of sight.
This is important, Beatrice, Sarah said as she was leaving. When they come over, you need to act completely normal. If Cassandra suspects you know anything, she'll bolt. Can you do that? Can you sit across from this woman who's been planning to destroy your family and pretend everything is fine? I thought about all those Sunday dinners, all those times Cassandra had called me Mama Beatrice while mentally calculating how much she could steal from us, all those journal entries documenting her manipulation with cold precision. Yes, I said, I can do that. Setting the trap. I called Trevor at 10 a.m. Mom, is everything okay? He always sounded worried when I called outside our usual patterns. Everything fine, sweetheart. Actually, I wanted to talk to you and Cassandra about something important. Are you both free for dinner tonight? Sure. What's this about? I took a breath, trying to keep my voice steady. I've been thinking about what Cassandra mentioned, about the house and downsizing and being practical about the future. I think we should have a serious conversation about it. The pause on the other end of the line was pregnant with surprise and hope. Really? Mom, wow, okay. Yes, absolutely. We'll be there. What time? 6 o'clock? We'll be there. And, Mom, thank you for being open to this conversation. I know how much the house means to you. After I hung up, I stood in my kitchen for a long moment, pressing my palms against the cool countertop. I just lied to my son, set a trap using his trust in me as bait. It felt horrible, but Sarah was right. This was the only way to catch Cassandra and protect Trevor from making a catastrophic mistake. The hours until 6 o'clock crawled by like years. I tried to keep myself busy. I cleaned the house top to bottom, prepared a simple dinner of roasted chicken and vegetables, set the dining room table with my regular dishes instead of the nice china. Everything needed to look normal, routine, like any other Sunday dinner. Sarah called at 3 p.m. to confirm that everything was in place. She said that officers would be positioned around my property, out of sight, and she'd be in an unmarked car down the street. When you're ready for us to come in, text me the word help and we'll move. But Beatrice, don't put yourself in danger. If at any point you feel threatened, I'll be fine, I said, with more confidence than I felt. She's not going to do anything with Trevor here. You'd be surprised what people do when they feel cornered, Sarah said darkly. Just be careful. At 5:45, I stood in front of my hallway mirror and practiced my smile. I looked like someone preparing for battle, not dinner. My face was pale, my eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. I put on lipstick, something I rarely wore, and a nice blouse. Armor, of a sort. Trevor's Tesla pulled into my driveway at exactly 6 p.m. Through the window, I watched them get out, my son in khakis and a button-down shirt, Cassandra in a sundress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She was carrying flowers. Sunflowers. My favorite. Of course she was. I opened the door before they could knock, my practiced smile firmly in place. Come in, come in. Perfect timing. Dinner's just about ready. Mama Beatrice. Cassandra hugged me, pressing the flowers into my hands. These are for you. Trevor told me you seemed stressed lately, and I wanted to brighten your day. That's so thoughtful, sweetheart. Let me put these in water.
In the kitchen, with my back to them as I arranged the flowers in a vase, I heard Cassandra whisper to Trevor, "See? I told you she'd come around. She just needed time to think about it." My hands tightened on the vase. I wanted to spin around and throw it at her, to scream that I knew exactly what she was, that her manipulation wouldn't work anymore. Instead, I took a deep breath and carried the vase to the dining room table. Dinner's ready. Let's eat first, and then we can talk about the house situation. The meal was surreal. Cassandra complimented everything. The chicken was perfectly seasoned, the vegetables were cooked just right, the table looked lovely. She asked about my week, told a funny story about something that had happened at the grocery store, acted like this was just another pleasant family dinner. Trevor seemed nervous but hopeful, glancing between Cassandra and me like he couldn't quite believe this was happening. I played my part. I smiled, I engaged in small talk, I pretended that my world hadn't been turned upside down in the past 24 hours. Finally, after we'd cleared the dishes,
We sat back down at the dining room table. "So," Trevor said, jumping right in with the enthusiasm of someone who thinks a problem is about to be solved, "you said you wanted to talk about the house." I nodded slowly. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since our last conversation. About my future, about being practical, about what's best for everyone." Cassandra leaned forward slightly, her amber eyes intent. "That's so wise of you, Mama Beatrice. It takes courage to make big changes." "It does," I agreed. "That's why I think it's important to be completely honest with each other, to make sure we really know who we're trusting with important decisions." Something flickered in Cassandra's expression, there and gone so fast I might have imagined it. "Of course. Honesty is the foundation of family." "I'm glad you feel that way, because I have some questions I'd like you to answer, just to help me feel comfortable moving forward." Trevor looked confused. "Mom, what kind of questions?" "Just basic things like Cassandra's background, her family, her past. I realized we don't really know very much about her, and if we're going to be making major life decisions together, we should probably know each other better." Cassandra's smile stayed in place, but her eyes had gone very still. "What would you like to know?" "Well, for starters, what was your mother's name? You mentioned she died when you were young." "Elizabeth. Elizabeth Reeves." "And your father?" "Thomas. Thomas Reeves." "Where did you grow up?" "South Carolina, Charleston area." "And where did you go to school?" A slight pause. "I went to several schools. We moved around a lot after my mother died." "That must have been hard. What year did your mother pass away?" 2002. I was 12. I pulled out my phone, pretending to make a note. "And you said you have no other family? No siblings, aunts, uncles?" "Mom," Trevor interrupted, looking uncomfortable. "What is this? An interrogation?" "I'm just trying to get to know Cassandra better, honey. Is that so wrong?" Cassandra put her hand on Trevor's arm. "It's okay, baby. I understand. Beatrice wants to make sure I'm good enough for her son." She turned to me with what I'm sure she thought was a disarming smile. "I'm an open book, Mama Beatrice. Ask me anything." "Okay," I said. "Have you ever used any other names besides Cassandra Reeves?" The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. "What?" Cassandra's smile faltered. "I'm asking if you've ever used any other names. It's a simple question." Trevor stood up. "Mom, that's enough. I don't know what's gotten into you, but—" "Sit down, Trevor." My voice was sharp enough that he actually did it, looking shocked. I'd never spoken to him like that before. "I'm not done yet." I looked directly at Cassandra. "Have you ever used the name Jennifer Walsh, or Amy Chen, or Melissa Patterson, or Sarah Mitchell, or Victoria James, or Rebecca Morrison?" With each name, Cassandra's face went a shade paler. Trevor looked completely confused, his head swiveling between us like he couldn't quite believe this was happening. "I know you Rebecca Morrison." That's when Cassandra's mask finally cracked. The sweet, warm, caring persona evaporated, replaced by something cold and hard and dangerous. "You went through my boxes," she said quietly. Trevor looked at her confused. "What boxes? What is happening right now?"
"Your mother," Cassandra said, her voice dripping with contempt, "violated my privacy by going through personal belongings I stored in her basement, and now she's making up insane accusations to sabotage our relationship." "I didn't make up anything," I said. "Everything is documented in those 7 boxes you left in my basement. The fake IDs, the newspaper clippings about your victims, the journal entries where you describe in detail how you planned to manipulate Trevor and me, how we were just your next targets." Trevor's face had gone white. "Mom, Please tell me this is some kind of sick joke. It's not a joke, sweetheart. The woman you think you love doesn't exist. She's a character created to exploit vulnerable people. And you were vulnerable after your divorce, and I was vulnerable as an elderly widow living alone with valuable property. We were perfect targets. Trevor, Cassandra said, her voice taking on a pleading quality, you know me. You know I love you. Your mother is confused, maybe early dementia. Don't, I cut her off. Don't you dare try to make him think I'm losing my mind. I have 7 boxes of evidence. I have your journals where you write about us like we're marks in a con. I have newspaper articles about the people you've stolen from. I have your fake identification documents. I have everything. Trevor, Cassandra tried again. We should leave. Let your mother calm down and we can sort this out tomorrow. Is it true? Trevor asked her, his voice barely above a whisper. Any of it? Of course not. Your mother is... Then prove it, he said, louder now. If it's not true, if you don't have anything to hide, let her show me these boxes. Let's look at this supposed evidence together and prove that she's wrong. The silence stretched out for what felt like an hour. Cassandra stood frozen, her mind clearly working through her options. She could try to run, but Trevor was between her and the door. She could continue to deny, but the evidence was overwhelming. She could try her way out of it, but Trevor's trust was already cracking. Finally, she did something I didn't expect. She laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound, nothing like the warm laughter I'd heard over the past 6 months. You want to see the boxes? Fine. Let's go down to the basement right now. Let's see what dear Mama Beatrice has cooked up. I stood up carefully, reaching for my phone. This was it, the moment where everything either worked or fell apart. I sent a text to Sarah, coming to basement, ready. Then I led them both toward the basement stairs, toward the 7 boxes that would destroy Cassandra's carefully constructed lies and break my son's heart in the process. But as we reached the basement door, Cassandra suddenly grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. You know what's funny, she said, her voice low and dangerous. I actually liked you. You were sweet, trusting, easier than most. This could have been painless, but you had to go snooping, didn't you? You couldn't just play your role like a good little victim. Let go of my mother, Trevor said, his voice deadly quiet. Cassandra released me, but her eyes were blazing. The boxes are gone, by the way. I moved them yesterday. So whatever little trap you're planning, Beatrice, it's not going to work. My blood ran cold. I'd been so focused on the evidence, on planning the confrontation, that I hadn't considered she might have already moved them. But then Trevor spoke, his voice hard and cold in a way I'd never heard before. Grandma, we're leaving. Now. And I realized he wasn't talking to me. He was talking to Cassandra, because in her moment of anger, in her threat, she had revealed exactly what she was, and my son had finally seen the truth. Grandma, we're leaving, now. Trevor's words hung in the air like a physical presence. For a split second, I thought he was telling me to leave, that he'd chosen to believe Cassandra, that my son was lost to this woman's manipulation. My heart stopped in my chest. But then I saw his face. The way he was looking at Cassandra wasn't with love or confusion. It was with the kind of cold, betrayed fury that only comes when you realize someone you trusted has been playing you for a fool from the very beginning. Trevor? Baby, let me explain, Cassandra started, her voice shifting back to that pleading, vulnerable tone she'd used so effectively for 6 months. Don't, he cut her off. Don't you dare try to make him think I'm losing my mind. I have 7 boxes of evidence. I have your journals where you write about us like we're marks in a con. I have newspaper articles about the people you've stolen from. I have your fake identification documents. I have everything. Trevor, Cassandra tried again. We should leave. Let your mother calm down and we can sort this out tomorrow. Work through this? Trevor's laugh was harsh and broken. You researched me like I was a project? You targeted me because I was vulnerable after my divorce, and you manipulated my relationship with my mother to try to steal from both of us. And you're calling that love? I chose you, Cassandra said. And there was genuine emotion in her voice now, although I couldn't tell if it was real or just another layer of the con.
Stop, I said quietly. Just stop lying. We've all had enough. Cassandra turned to me, and for the first time since I'd met her, I saw who she really was. Not the sweet, orphaned girl looking for family, not the charming woman who brought sunflowers and called me Mama Beatrice, but a predator who'd spent years perfecting the art of exploitation. "You know what your problem is, Beatrice?" she said, her voice venomous. "You're so desperate for a daughter that you couldn't see what was right in front of you. I played you perfectly. Every smile, every hug, every Mama Beatrice, you ate it up like a starving dog. You wanted to believe in me so badly that you ignored every red flag." The words hurt because there was truth in them. I had been lonely. I had wanted Trevor to be happy. I had welcomed this woman into my heart because I'd needed someone to nurture, someone to add warmth to my too quiet house. "You're right," I said softly. "I did want to believe in you. That's what makes what you did so much worse. You didn't just steal money from your victims, Cassandra, or whatever your real name is. You stole their trust, their hope, their belief that there was still goodness in the world. That's the real crime." "Oh, please," Cassandra scoffed. "Don't act so high and mighty. Every single one of my victims had more money than they needed. They were sitting on fortunes while people my age can't even afford rent. I was just redistributing the wealth." "By lying," Trevor said, his voice shaking with anger. "By pretending to care about people, by making them feel loved and valued right before you destroyed them." "And by the way," I added, "the boxes aren't gone. I photographed every piece of evidence before you could have possibly moved them. Detective Sarah Morrison has copies of everything. Every fake ID, every newspaper article, every journal entry where you documented your crimes in detail." Cassandra's face went white. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen, dozens and dozens of photos of her documents, her journals, her carefully maintained records of fraud. I spent all night documenting everything. Every name you've used, every person you've stolen from, every cent you've taken. It's all here, backed up to the cloud, and already in the hands of the police. For the first time, I saw real fear in Cassandra's eyes. Not the performance of fear that she'd used to manipulate us, but genuine terror of someone who realizes the walls are closing in. "Trevor," she said, turning to him with desperation in her voice. "Trevor, please! I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can leave right now, start over somewhere new. I have money saved. We could go anywhere, South America, Europe, somewhere they can't find us. We could have the life we planned, just the two of us." "You actually think I'd run away with you?" Trevor's voice was barely controlled. "You think I'd abandon my mother and flee the country with a con artist? Are you completely insane?" "I'm offering you a chance of happiness." Cassandra's voice was rising now, becoming shrill. "A chance to escape from this suffocating relationship with your mother, from this boring town, from this mediocre life you've built. I can give you adventure, excitement, freedom. You can give me prison time as an accessory to your crimes. That's all you can give me now." Cassandra's expression shifted again, this time to cold calculation. Her eyes darted to the door, measuring the distance. I could see her mind working, evaluating her options. "Don't even think about it," I said, holding up my phone. "I texted the police before we came down here. They're already outside." "You're lying," Cassandra said, but her voice lacked conviction. As if on cue, we heard footsteps on the porch above us, then loud knocking on my front door. "Police, Miss Holloway, this is Detective Morrison. Are you okay?" Cassandra's face crumpled. For a moment, she looked young and lost and genuinely terrified.
Then her expression hardened into something ugly and defiant. "This isn't over," she hissed at me. "You think you've won? You've just destroyed your son's happiness. He'll never forgive you for this. You'll die alone in this house, and he'll spend the rest of his life resenting you for ruining the best thing that ever happened to him." "No," Trevor said, quietly, moving to stand beside me. "The best thing that ever happened to me was having a mother who loved me enough to protect me from a predator, even when it meant breaking my heart." The knocking came again, more insistent. "Miss Holloway, we're coming in." "We're okay," I called up the stairs. "We're in the dining room." I heard my front door open, I'd left it unlocked as planned, and footsteps entering my house. Detective Sarah Morrison appeared at the top of the basement stairs, 2 uniformed officers behind her. Sarah took in the scene quickly. Trevor and me standing together, Cassandra backed against the wall like a cornered animal. "Melissa Patterson," Sarah said, her voice official and cold. "Also known as Jennifer Walsh, Amy Chen, Rebecca Morrison, Sarah Mitchell, Victoria James, and Cassandra Reeves. You're under arrest for multiple counts of elder fraud, identity theft, and fleeing prosecution." "I want a lawyer," Melissa, said immediately. "You'll get one," Sarah replied. "Officer Williams, read for her rights." As the officer began reciting the Miranda warning, Cassandra's eyes stayed locked on Trevor. There was something in her expression, regret, genuine feelings, or just anger at a con that had fallen apart. "I meant it," she said softly, interrupting the officer mid-sentence. "What I said about loving you, that part was real."
Trevor looked at her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was tired and sad and utterly certain. "No, it wasn't, because if you'd really loved me, you would have told me the truth. You would have chosen honesty over manipulation. You would have seen me as a person instead of a target. What you felt wasn't love, Cassandra. It was just the thrill of a successful con." The officer finished reading Cassandra her rights and moved to handcuff her. She didn't resist, but as they led her past us toward the stairs, she stopped and looked at me one last time. "You know what's funny?" she said, and there was no warmth in her smile. "I actually did like you, Beatrice. In another life, we might have actually been family." "No," I said quietly. "We wouldn't have. Because in any life, you'd still be a liar and a thief. And I'd still be someone who values honesty and trust. We were never going to be family." They led her up the stairs and out of my house. Through the window, I watched them put her in the back of a police car, her blonde hair catching the late evening sunlight. Neighbors were emerging from their houses, drawn by the commotion. I'd have a lot of explaining to do in the coming days. But right now, all I cared about was the fact that Trevor was still standing beside me, his arm around my shoulders, both of us shaking with the aftermath of adrenaline and heartbreak. The aftermath. Sarah stayed after the other officers left, sitting with us at my dining room table while we drank tea that had gone cold and tried to process what had just happened. "We've been looking for her for almost 5 years, Sarah said, scrolling through her phone. "She's wanted in 6 states. The woman's real name, as far as we can tell, is Melissa Ann Patterson. She's originally from a small town in upstate New York. Her mother actually died when she was young, that part was true, but not when she was 12, when she was 19. And she didn't die naturally. Melissa was investigated for her mother's death, though never charged. The mother had just updated her life insurance policy with Melissa as the beneficiary." Trevor's hand tightened around his mug. "She killed her own mother?" "We can't prove it," Sarah said carefully. "But the insurance company was suspicious enough that they held up payment for 2 years. By the time they finally paid out, Melissa had disappeared. The next time she surfaced was 3 years later in Hartford, Connecticut, running the same basic con. Befriend elderly people, gain their trust, steal their money, disappear." "How much has she stolen total?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "Conservatively, probably close to $2 million over the past decade, maybe more. She's smart, careful.
She never took so much from any one victim that it would trigger immediate red flags. She'd bleed them slowly, carefully, then vanish before they realized what was happening. And I almost let her do it to us, Trevor said, his voice hollow. He'd been mostly silent since Cassandra was arrested, sitting at the table with his head in his hands. I almost married her. I almost convinced Mom to sell her house. I believed every single lie. You couldn't have known, I said, putting my hand over his. She was a professional, Trevor. This is what she does for a living. She studies people, finds their vulnerabilities, and exploits them perfectly. You're not stupid or weak for falling for it. You're human. Your mother's right, Sarah added. We've interviewed some of her other victims. These were smart, educated people. A retired judge, a former CEO, a university professor. She's extraordinarily good at what she does. Don't beat yourself up for being manipulated by an expert manipulator. What happens now? Trevor asked. With her, I mean. What's she facing? Sarah pulled up something on her tablet. With the warrants from multiple states and the evidence your mother collected, she's looking at potentially 15 to 20 years in federal prison. Elder fraud, especially when it crosses state lines, is taken very seriously, and her pattern of fleeing prosecution will mean no bail this time. She's going to jail, and she's staying there. Good, Trevor said with quiet vehemence. She deserves it. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of the evening settling over us. Finally, Sarah stood to leave. I'll need formal statements from both of you tomorrow, and Beatrice will need those boxes from your basement for evidence. But right now, you both should rest. You've been through a trauma, even if it doesn't feel like it yet. After Sarah left, Trevor and I sat in my living room. It was past midnight. Through the window, I could see that most of my neighbors' lights had gone out, the street returning to its usual quiet. Mom, Trevor said finally, his voice cracking, I'm so sorry. I almost let her destroy you. I was so angry when you questioned her, so ready to defend her. I almost chose her over you. But you didn't, I said firmly. When it mattered, when she showed her true colors, you saw through her. You protected me. That's what counts. I should have listened to you earlier. All those concerns you raised, all those questions, you were right, and I shut you down because I was so desperate to be happy again after Stephanie. I turned to face him, taking both his hands in mine. Trevor, listen to me. What Stephanie did to you was cruel and wrong, but that doesn't mean everyone is going to hurt you. There are good people out there. There will be someone, someday, who deserves your trust and your love. This experience doesn't have to make you cynical. It just means you'll be more careful, more observant, and that's not a bad thing.
How are you so calm about this? He asked, tears streaming down his face. She almost stole everything from us. She played us both for months. How are you not furious? Oh, I'm furious, I said, but I'm also relieved. Relieved that we caught her before she succeeded. Relieved that you're safe. Relieved that we still have each other. The anger will fade, Trevor. What matters is that we survived, and we survived together. He pulled me into a hug, and we sat there for a long time, holding each other the way we had when he was a little boy and had woken from a nightmare. I stroked his hair and let him cry, knowing that sometimes the only thing a mother can do is be present while her child processes pain. 3 months later. The trial was scheduled for January 2025, but Melissa Patterson, she'd never be Cassandra to me again, had taken a plea deal. Faced with overwhelming evidence from multiple states, she'd agreed to plead guilty to multiple counts of elder fraud in exchange for a reduced sentence. 15 years in federal prison. She'd be in her 50s when she got out. I attended the sentencing hearing with Trevor. Sarah Morrison sat with us, and I was surprised to see several other people in the courtroom, older people who looked vaguely familiar from the newspaper clippings I'd found. Those are some of her other victims, Sarah whispered. They came from Connecticut, Vermont, Ohio. They wanted to see her face consequences. When Melissa was brought into the courtroom in her orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed,
She looked completely different from the woman who'd sat at my dinner table. Her blonde hair had been cut short and was growing out dark at the roots. Without makeup, she looked older, harder. The transformation was jarring. The judge read through the charges and asked if Melissa had anything to say before sentencing. Her lawyer advised her to stay quiet, but she stood anyway. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady, "I know I can't undo what I've done. I know I've hurt people, destroyed trust, stolen money that wasn't mine. I could say I was desperate or that my difficult childhood made me this way, but the truth is simpler than that. I got good at lying, and lying paid well, and somewhere along the way I stopped caring about the people I was hurting." She turned to look at the victims in the gallery, her eyes passing over each of them before landing on me. "To the people I've harmed, I can't ask for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I remember every one of you. Mrs. Chen in Hartford, who made me tea every afternoon, Mr. Martinez in Burlington, who showed me photos of his grandchildren, Mrs. Washington in Pittsburgh, who taught me to knit, Mr. Stevens in Columbus, who told the best stories about his time in the Navy." She paused, her voice catching slightly. "And Beatrice and Trevor Holloway in Asheville, who almost became my family for real. I want you all to know that I remember you, and that whatever time I spend in prison, I'll be carrying the weight of what I took from you. Not just money, but trust and hope and the belief that people can be good." The judge was unmoved. "Miss Patterson, your crimes were calculated and cruel. You targeted the vulnerable, exploited their loneliness, and showed no remorse until you were caught. The sentence stands: 15 years in federal prison, followed by 10 years of supervised probation. You'll also be required to pay restitution to all your victims, though I doubt you have the means to do so." As they led Melissa away, she looked back one more time. Her eyes met mine, and I saw something there. Not quite remorse, but maybe the beginning of it. Or maybe that was just wishful thinking on my part one more time when I wanted to believe there was something redeemable in her. Outside the courthouse, several of Melissa's other victims approached us. An elderly black woman with kind eyes introduced herself as Dorothy Washington from Pittsburgh. "Your mother is the hero of this story," she said to Trevor. "If she hadn't caught her, if she hadn't collected all that evidence, that woman would still be out there stealing from people. You should be proud of her." "I am," Trevor said, putting his arm around my shoulders. "Trust me, I am." We exchanged contact information with some of the other victims. We'd formed an unlikely support group, bound together by our shared experience of being targeted by the same predator. Sarah Morrison had told us that this kind of connection could be healing, and she was right. There was something comforting in knowing we weren't alone in having been fooled. 6 months later, summer 2025. Life slowly returned to normal, though normal looked different now. Trevor had thrown himself back into his work, expanding his engineering firm and hiring 2 new associates. He'd started dating again, cautiously this time, taking things slowly, being more observant. He'd met his new girlfriend, Rachel, a fellow engineer who'd recently moved to Asheville from Atlanta. She was smart, funny, and most importantly, completely transparent about her life. She invited me to dinner at her apartment and showed me photos of her family, her childhood home, her college graduation. She understood why trust needed to be earned slowly, and she was patient with Trevor's wariness. As for me, I'd become something of a local celebrity. The story of how a 70-year-old woman had taken down a serial con artist had made the rounds in Asheville's close-knit community. I'd been interviewed by the local news, and a reporter from a true crime podcast had reached out wanting to feature my story. More meaningfully, I'd started volunteering with a program that educated elderly people about financial scams and exploitation. I gave talks at senior centers, churches, and community organizations, teaching people how to recognize the warning signs of fraud and trust their instincts when something felt wrong.
The thing about con artists, I'd tell my audiences, is that they're experts at finding what we need emotionally and offering it to us. They study us like scientists, identifying our vulnerabilities
and crafting personas specifically designed to exploit them. The best defense isn't paranoia, it's awareness. Ask questions, verify information, and never, ever let anyone make you feel guilty for being careful with your trust. My house on Magnolia Street had become even more precious to me after nearly losing it. I'd started a garden project, transforming my backyard into a vegetable garden where I grew tomatoes, peppers, and herbs. Margaret came over most Saturdays to help, and we'd spend hours with our hands in the dirt, talking about everything and nothing. Trevor still came for Sunday dinners, now sometimes bringing Rachel. We'd sit at the same dining room table where Cassandra had once charmed us, but now the meals felt more genuine, more relaxed. There was no hidden agenda, no manipulation lurking beneath pleasant conversation, just family, real family, built on honesty and trust. One Sunday in late June, almost exactly a year after Cassandra had first asked about storing boxes in my basement, Trevor and I were sitting on my porch after dinner. Rachel had gone home, and it was just the two of us watching the fireflies emerge in the twilight. "Mom," Trevor said suddenly, "I never properly thanked you." "For what?" "For saving me. For having the courage to go through those boxes even though you knew it would hurt me. For trusting your instincts when I was too blinded by what I wanted to believe. For protecting me, even when it meant I'd be angry with you." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "That's what mothers do, sweetheart. We protect our children, even when they're grown, even when it's hard, even when they don't want to be protected." I know I said this before, but I really am sorry for how I acted when you first raised concerns about her, for dismissing your intuition, for making you feel like you couldn't talk to me about your suspicions. "You were in love," I said gently, "or you thought you were. And love makes us vulnerable to deception because we want so badly to believe the best about the people we care about. You have nothing to apologize for." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the cicadas and watching the sky darken from blue to purple to black. "Do you ever think about her?" Trevor asked. "Wonder what she's doing in prison?" "Sometimes," I admitted. I wonder if she's really reflecting on what she did, or if she's just angry she got caught. I wonder if there was ever any part of her that was real, or if it was all performance. Mostly, though, I try not to think about her at all. She took up enough space in our lives. I don't want to give her any more. Rachel asked me about her the other day, wanted to know the whole story. It was strange telling it to someone new. It's starting to feel like something that happened to someone else, like a story I read in a book. "That's good," I said. "That means you're healing. The trauma is becoming a memory instead of a constant wound." "Rachel's different," Trevor said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "She's, I don't know, real, solid. What you see is what you get. There's no mystery, no hidden layers. And I used to think that was boring, but now I realize that's actually what I need. Someone uncomplicated. Someone honest." "She seems lovely," I said truthfully, "and she clearly adores you." "We're taking it slow. Really slow. But I think this might be something real, Mom. Something that lasts." "I hope so, sweetheart. You deserve happiness. Real happiness, not the illusion of it." As the night deepened around us, I felt a profound sense of peace. Yes, we'd been through something traumatic. Yes, we'd been deceived and manipulated and nearly destroyed. But we survived. We caught the predator before she could complete her con. We protected each other. And in some strange way, the experience had brought Trevor and I closer than we had been in years. He called more often now, dropped by for no reason, valued my opinion and my presence in his life in a way he hadn't since he was a teenager. The crisis had reminded us both that family, real family, built on genuine love and trust, was precious and worth fighting for. 1 year later, August 2026. I was in my garden on a Saturday morning when my phone rang. Sarah Morrison's name appeared on the screen. Sarah, how are you? Doing well, Beatrice. I'm calling with some news about Melissa Patterson. My hand tightened on my phone. What kind of news? She's been cooperating with the FBI, providing information about other con artists she worked with, other schemes she knows about. In exchange, they've reduced her sentence to 10 years with possibility of parole after 7 for good behavior. I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Anger that she'd get out sooner, relief that she was at least trying to do something right, resignation that this was probably the best outcome we could hope for. How do you feel about that? Sarah asked. I don't know, I said honestly. Some part of me wants her locked up forever, but another part of me hopes that maybe this means she's actually changing. That the person she pretended to be, kind, caring, remorseful, might actually become who she is. I thought you should know that, Sarah said. Also, the FBI recovered about $400,000 that she had hidden in offshore accounts. It's being distributed among her victims. You and Trevor should each receive about $15,000.
I don't want it, I said immediately. Give my portion to one of the victims who lost more, or to programs that help elderly people avoid financial exploitation. I figured you'd say that, Sarah said with a laugh. You're a good person, Beatrice Holloway. After we hung up, I sat in my garden for a long time, thinking about Melissa Patterson and all the people she'd hurt, thinking about how close she'd come to destroying my family, thinking about how thin the line was between the person she pretended to be and the person she actually was. In the end, though, what mattered most wasn't what Melissa had tried to do to us. It was what we'd done in response. We'd trusted our instincts. We'd protected each other. We'd chosen truth over comfortable lies. And we'd survived. The final Sunday dinner. 2 years after Cassandra's arrest, Trevor brought Rachel to Sunday dinner with an announcement. "Mom," he said, his face glowing with happiness, "we're engaged." I hugged them both, tears streaming down my face. "I'm so happy for you both." Rachel showed me the ring, a simple, elegant band with a single diamond. "We wanted to tell you first," she said, "before anyone else, because Trevor says you're the most important person in his life and we wouldn't be here without you." "That's not quite true," I said. "You're here because you love each other. I just removed an obstacle." "You did more than that," Trevor said, seriously. "You taught me to trust my instincts again, to value honesty over charm, to be careful with my heart without closing it off completely. If you hadn't stopped Cassandra, I'd either be in prison as her accomplice or bankrupt and alone. Instead, I'm here with Rachel, and I'm happy, really, truly happy." As we sat down to dinner, Rachel's first time experiencing my somewhat mediocre cooking, I looked around my dining room table. The same table where Cassandra had sat, plotting and scheming. The same room where I'd confronted her. The same house she'd tried to steal from me. But now, it was filled with genuine love and honest laughter. No hidden agendas, no manipulation. Just a mother, her son, and the woman he loved building a real family on a foundation of trust. "Tell me everything," I said to Rachel. "How did he propose?" As she launched into the story, something involving a hike in the mountains and a surprise picnic, I caught Trevor's eye. He smiled at me, and I smiled back. And in that moment, we shared an understanding that needed no words. We'd been tested. We'd been hurt. We'd been betrayed by someone we'd trusted. But we'd survived, together. And we'd come out stronger on the other side. That night, after Trevor and Rachel left, I stood on my porch looking out at Magnolia Street, my street, in my neighborhood, in my house that I'd defended and kept. I thought about Melissa Patterson in her prison cell, serving time for her crimes. I hoped she was genuinely changing, genuinely becoming a better person. But whether she was or not, she'd taught me something valuable.
She'd taught me that trust is precious and should be guarded carefully, that instinct and intuition are gifts we should honor, that real family, is worth fighting for, even when the fight is hard. But most of all, she'd taught me that I was stronger than I'd known. At 70 years old, I'd faced down a predator who had been operating successfully for a decade. I'd protected my son and my home. I'd helped bring a criminal to justice. I wasn't just Trevor's mother or Gerald's widow or a retired teacher living alone in a too-big house. I was Beatrice Holloway, survivor, protector, fighter. And I was exactly where I belonged. Epilogue. 3 years later. The wedding was beautiful. Trevor and Rachel got married in my backyard under an arbor that Trevor had built himself. A small ceremony, just 30 people, with the Blue Ridge Mountains providing the backdrop. I stood beside Trevor as Rachel walked down the makeshift aisle, her face radiant with joy. When the minister asked who gave this woman to be married, Rachel's father said the traditional words, but then Trevor added something unexpected. "And my mother gives us both her blessing," he said, looking at me with tears in his eyes, "because without her wisdom and courage, I wouldn't be here today." During the reception, Margaret pulled me aside. "You did good, Bea," she said, using the nickname only my oldest friends were allowed. "Look at him. Look how happy he is." "It's not because of me," I protested. "It's because he found the right person." "It's because you stopped him from marrying the wrong person," Margaret corrected. "You saved your son's life, even if he doesn't fully realize it." As the sun set over the mountains and the party continued in my backyard, I felt a profound sense of gratitude, not for what had happened, I wouldn't wish that experience on anyone, but for how it ended. My family was safe. My son was happy. My home was still mine. And somewhere in a federal prison, Melissa Patterson was serving her time, hopefully learning that there were better ways to live than by preying on the vulnerable. I'd never forget what she'd tried to do to us, but I wouldn't let it define us either. We were more than her victims. We were survivors. We were family. And we were exactly where we belonged. Thank you for following my story to the end. I hope it reminds you to trust your instincts, protect the people you love, and never be afraid to ask questions when something feels wrong. And please, comment below which country you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story has reached. If you or someone you know has been a victim of elder fraud or financial exploitation, please contact your local police department or the National Elder Fraud Hotline. You are not alone, and help is available. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember, real love never asks you to ignore your doubts.